Hello, we're back. In episode 55, I said we'd be talking about the port of Invader to the Atari 2600, otherwise known as the Atari VCS, programmed in 6502 assembly language using the DASM Assembler. I'm using Visual Studio Code. It supports 6502 assembly and the DASM Assembler, and it uses a single button to compile and run the program in an emulator of your choice. I'm using Stella for this example. Here's our assembly code. There are over 700 lines of code in this simple demo. I had to take some shortcuts and able to get my number of cycles down to the number available in a single frame. On the Atari 2600, you're responsible for drawing every scan line, every frame, and timing it so your sprites show up at just the right tick of a frame in order to place them where you want them on the screen. This is a very difficult thing to do for a novice programmer. I use some subroutines from my different books to draw sprites and the score to the screen. Here's the display score subroutine. And here's the subroutine used to position sprites. I only partially understand the subroutines. This, without a doubt, is the hardest version of Invader I have programmed so far. I feel like if you could learn to program a full playable game in assembly on the Atari 2600, you can probably program a game in any language for any system. Remember I showed a version of Invader for the Atari 2600 that I created in Atari Basic back in episode 19? This was a much easier task, but I considered it cheating and still wanted to make a version in assembly. You'll see that I don't have sound or a proper game over screen, but otherwise it's fully functional. I purposely showed the Unreal Engine and Atari 2600 versions of these videos back to back to show the difference between early game development on vintage hardware and today's cutting-edge development tools on a modern PC. Let's go ahead and assemble and run by clicking on the launch icon down here. This will assemble my code and launch the Stella emulator so we can try it out. You'll notice right away that I don't have sound, and I also used a scheme to show health instead of a number of lives left. One hit turns your turret yellow. Another hit turns your turret red. And a final hit will end the game. Also notice that the Invader has an associated missile that is the same color, and the same is true for the turret. That's why the turret missile also changes color as you take damage. That's how the hardware was set up. Just 2 players and their associated missiles, a ball, and a chunky background, since the hardware was originally designed to play Pong-like games. So when you see an Atari 2600 game with a bunch of sprites moving independently, there are a lot of tricks used to make that possible. You'll notice flicker in some of those games as different sprites are being drawn on different frames. Programmers achieved things on the Atari 2600 that even the hardware designer, Jay Miner, didn't think was possible. Now let's take a look at Invader on a real Atari 2600. I'm using a Harmony cartridge to play my game on original hardware. Okay, we'll insert our cartridge, turn on our machine, we'll go down to our developer folder and run it. And it works. Now we're yellow and firing a yellow shot. And we're red and firing a red shot. Let's score one more point here. And game over. Now let's compare that with the version that I did in Atari Basic. This has the score on the bottom, it has sound, it also shows lives, with those little blocks in the lower right hand corner. So if I lose a life, you can see one of those blocks goes away. And it also has a proper game over screen. I may eventually return to my assembly version to fix some of its shortcomings, but getting to this point, where it is now, was difficult enough, and I wanted to get this video out. If you haven't checked out my other videos, I'll leave a link in the description where you can find them. This video brings me up to 56 episodes in total, and I have content for 4 more ready to go. I just have to make the videos. So, next episode I will be showing a port of Invader to the Thumby in MicroPython using the Thumby editor and the Tiny Circuits game library. That about wraps up episode 56 of my journey in game programming. Please like and subscribe and leave any comments or suggestions you may have that could make these a better experience. Until then, bye. I'll talk to you next time.